Hey everyone, welcome back to Drama Llamas of Reddit, and a special welcome to anyone who's new here. Today's stories are all about money and that magical phrase people love to use when they want it for free. But we're family. From relatives who suddenly discover your salary to family members who treat you like a personal bank with no withdrawal limits, these stories prove one thing very clearly. Just because we share DNA does not mean you get access to my wallet. So get comfy, grab a drink or a snack, and if you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. Let's get into it. This all started the moment I got a better paying job, which was supposed to be a good thing. I had worked hard for years, climbed my way up slowly, and finally landed a position that paid enough for me to breathe a little. Nothing flashy, just stable, just comfortable. At first, only a few people knew. My partner knew, my parents knew, life continued normally, and no one suddenly treated me differently. Then my aunt found out. I am still not entirely sure how the information traveled, but family gossip has a way of moving faster than Wi-Fi. One casual conversation turned into another, and suddenly my salary became public knowledge, rounded up generously and retold like I had just signed a contract with a professional sports team. A few days later, my phone rang. It was my cousin, someone I had always gotten along with well. We were not extremely close, but we were friendly, and there had never been any drama between us. She sounded stressed and explained that she was short on rent that month and asked if I could lend her a little money until her next paycheck. She promised she would pay it back in 2 weeks. It sounded reasonable. I helped her. 2 weeks passed, nothing. I waited another week, then gently asked about it. She apologized, said things had been hectic, and promised she would send the money soon. I let it go. That was my first mistake. Not long after that, my uncle reached out. He needed help covering a car repair. It was only temporary. He knew I were doing well now and said he would appreciate it so much. Then my other cousin needed help with utilities. Then someone needed help with groceries just this once. Each request came wrapped in the same friendly tone and the same promise that it was short-term. Some people did pay me back, slowly. Others did not. But what really changed everything was the shift in attitude. The requests stopped sounding like favors and started sounding like expectations. One night at a family dinner, my aunt made a joke about how I was doing so well that I could probably cover dessert for everyone. People laughed. I laughed too because it felt awkward not to. Inside, something felt off. Later that week, I finally asked my cousin about the money she still owed me. Her response caught me completely off guard. She sounded offended and told me that I did not need it as much as she did, and that it felt greedy to keep asking when I knew how hard things were for her. That was the moment it clicked. To them, my income was no longer my income. It was a shared resource. When I pushed back and said I needed the money back because I had my own bills and responsibilities, the tone changed entirely. Suddenly, I was being accused of acting different since I started making more money. Someone told me I was letting money ruin family relationships. Another person said that if I really cared, I wouldn't keep track of who owed me what. The same people who had no problem asking for money now had a problem with me asking for it back. The final straw came when my aunt suggested, half joking and half serious, that I should stop thinking of it as loans and start thinking of it as helping family, because that was what family was for. That was when I stopped lending money. I sent polite messages explaining that I couldn't help financially anymore and that I needed to focus on my own household. The reaction was immediate. I was called selfish, I was told I had changed, some relatives stopped reaching out entirely. And that was when things got quiet. No more emergencies, no more sudden crises, no more messages asking if I was free to talk. Funny how that worked. A few months later, I ran into one of my cousins at a grocery store. She was perfectly fine, smiling, living her life. No mention of how hard things had been or how desperately she had needed help. That was when I realized the truth. They did not need me. They needed access to my wallet. Here's what I learned. The moment people find out how much you make, some of them do not see your hard work. They see an opportunity. And the fastest way to find out who actually values you is to stop funding their lifestyle. I did not lose family. I lost a subscription service. This started with what everyone in my family later loved to describe as just one small favor, which should have been my first warning sign. It was my cousin, someone I had grown up around and generally liked. We were not best friends, but we were close enough that helping once did not feel risky. She called me one evening sounding stressed and embarrassed, explaining that she had fallen behind on a bill and was about to get hit with late fees. She promised it was temporary. She had a paycheck coming and she just needed a little help to get through the week. I sent the money without hesitation. She thanked me repeatedly, told me how much it meant to her, and said she would pay me back as soon as she got paid. I believed her because at that point there was no reason not to. She did pay me back, not immediately, but eventually. And that, it turns out, was the real problem. Because once I had helped once and survived it, something shifted. A few weeks later, she messaged again. This time, it was groceries. Prices were high, things were tough, and she remembered how understanding I had been before. The amount was small, so I sent it. Then it was gas money. Then it was help covering a phone bill because she could not afford to miss work calls. Every request came with reassurance that this was the last time and gratitude that felt sincere enough to ignore the growing pattern. What I did not realize at the time was that I had stopped being a person and started being a solution. Soon, the requests were not just coming from her. Her name came up in conversations with other relatives, usually followed by comments about how kind I was and how helpful I had been when she was struggling. That kindness quietly turned into expectation. One day, another family member asked if I could help with an unexpected expense and mentioned that my cousin said I was good about that kind of thing. That was the first time I felt that sinking feeling in my stomach. The tone changed after that. When I hesitated, I was reminded that I had helped before. When I said I needed to think about it, it was told that it was only temporary. When I finally said no, the guilt started. I was told that things were really hard right now, that people were struggling, that it must be nice to not have to worry about money the way others did. Somehow, my responsible choices had become evidence that I owed something to everyone else. The breaking point came when my cousin messaged me again asking for help with rent. This time, it was a much larger amount. I told her I could not do it and explained that I needed to focus on my own finances and responsibilities. Her response was not understanding. It was cold. She reminded me that I had helped her before and asked what had changed. When I said that helping once did not mean I could help forever, she accused me of turning my back on family. A few days later, I saw a post on social media from her about how sad it was when people showed up for you once just to feel good about themselves and then disappeared when you really needed them. She did not use my name, but everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. Comments poured in. People praised her strength and criticized how some people forget where they come from. I said nothing. That silence bothered her more than any argument ever could. Messages started coming in from other relatives, asking if everything was okay and gently reminding me that family should help family. Not one of them asked how much I had already given or whether I was comfortable continuing. That was when I decided I was done. I sent one calm message explaining that I was not lending money anymore to anyone and that this was not open for discussion. I did not accuse, I did not justify, I simply stated it. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. I was told I had changed. I was told money had made me selfish. A few people stopped talking to me altogether. And then something interesting happened. The requests stopped. No more emergencies, no more urgent messages, no more posts about struggling. Life went on without my financial involvement. Several months after everything finally went quiet, I walked into a family gathering with the same low expectations I always had for those events. I went in prepared for awkward small talk, forced smiles, and the unspoken tension that settles in when people know there's history but pretend there isn't. I did not expect anything dramatic. I certainly did not expect clarity. The moment I saw my cousin across the room, something in me shifted. She was not stressed. She was not strapping. She was not carrying the weight she had once insisted was crushing her. She was laughing easily, dressed well, and moving through the room with the confidence of someone who felt completely comfortable.
She was animatedly talking about an upcoming vacation, describing travel plans and weekend getaways as if money had never been a concern in her life. What stood out the most was not what she said, but what she didn't say. There was no mention of bills, no hints about how hard things still were, no casual references to how much help had once meant to her. There was no awkward acknowledgement of the past, no discomfort, no tension. She acted as if nothing had ever happened. That was when it finally settled in. All those moments where I had been told things were desperate, temporary, and urgent replayed in my mind, but now they felt different. Seeing her like that stripped those memories of their emotional weight and left only the facts behind. The crisis was never permanent. The emergency was never endless. The situation was simply inconvenient, and I was convenient. As the gathering went on, I noticed other things too. She was not avoiding me, but she was not gravitating towards me either. The dynamic had changed. Without money as the glue holding the interaction together, there was nothing pulling us into conversation. We were polite, distant, and neutral, like relatives who shared a history but no longer shared expectations. That neutrality was oddly peaceful. As I moved through the room, I realized how much lighter I felt compared to previous gatherings. There was no background anxiety about whether someone would corner me with a request, no mental math about how much I could afford to give without hurting myself, no rehearsed explanations ready in case I needed to say no again. For the first time in a long while, I was just there to exist, not to provide. Later that evening, I watched my cousin interact with other family members, laughing and blending in effortlessly. Nothing about her behavior suggested someone in ongoing distress. Nothing about her lifestyle hinted at someone barely surviving. Life had continued, adjusted, and stabilized without my financial involvement, just like it always would have. That was the moment I stopped questioning myself. Up until then, part of me had carried a quiet sense of guilt, a small voice wondering if I had been too harsh or too cold. Seeing her like that silenced that voice completely. The guilt was never mine to carry. It was placed there intentionally because guilt was cheaper than repayment and easier than accountability. In the weeks that followed, I reflected on how quickly people adapt when access is removed. The panic disappears, the urgency fades, new solutions appear, budgets adjust, plans change. The world doesn't end just because one person stops stepping in. What I had mistaken for dependence was actually preference. They preferred that I help because it was easier. They preferred that I cover gaps because it saved them discomfort. When that option was gone, they didn't fall apart. They moved on. And so did I. I became more careful with my boundaries, not just with money, but with my emotional energy. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped feeling the need to justify decisions that were reasonable and responsible. I learned to recognize the difference between genuine need and learned reliance. Looking back now, that family gathering was not uncomfortable at all. It was revealing. It showed me exactly how temporary their crisis had been and how permanent my role had become in their minds until I stepped out of it. Helping once did not make me generous. It made me available. And availability, when it goes unchecked, quietly turns into obligation. I did not lose a relationship when I stopped paying. I lost a role I was never meant to have.
This last story started the moment my family decided that my financial stability was no longer mine. At the time, I was doing well. Not rich, not flashy, not living some luxury lifestyle, but stable enough that I was not constantly stressed about money. I paid my bills on time, had savings, and did not panic when unexpected expenses came up. To me, that felt normal. To my family, it apparently meant I had excess money just sitting around waiting to be claimed. The situation centered around a wedding. One of my relatives was getting married, and at first everything seemed normal. There were group chats, shared photos, excitement about venues and dresses. I congratulated them, wished them well, and assumed my involvement would be limited to attending and buying a gift like everyone else. Then the tone changed. I started hearing comments during family conversations about how expensive weddings had become and how unfair it was that young couples had to pay for everything themselves.
These comments were never directed at me directly, but they were always said within earshot, always followed by a glance in my direction. Eventually, the indirect hints stopped. I was approached and told that since I was doing well financially, it would make sense for me to help cover some of the costs, not because I was particularly close to the couple, not because I had offered, but because I could afford it. The expectation was framed as reasonable, almost obvious, as if refusing would be selfish by default. At first, it was presented as a small contribution, just a little help, something symbolic. But as the conversation continued, the list grew. Venue deposits, catering upgrades, decorations, photography. It became clear very quickly that this was not about helping. It was about transferring responsibility. When I said I was not comfortable paying for someone else's wedding, the reaction was immediate and intense. I was reminded that family was supposed to support each other. I was told that money meant less to me than it did to them. Someone even suggested that since I wasn't struggling, I should want to help. That was when I realized how easily generosity turns into obligation in the wrong hands. I explained calmly that I had my own financial goals, responsibilities, and boundaries. I did not owe anyone a wedding, and being financially responsible did not mean I had signed up to sponsor major life events for others. That explanation did not go over well. The story started changing almost immediately. Suddenly, I was painted as cold and unsupportive. I heard through others that I had apparently promised help and then backed out, which was never true. I was described as someone who cared more about money than family. People who had never asked how I felt about the situation suddenly had strong opinions about my character. The most frustrating part was watching how quickly my success became something I was supposed to apologize for. I stopped engaging. I did not argue. I did not correct every false version of the story. I simply declined to participate further and stepped back. The wedding went on without my financial contribution. Nothing fell apart. The venue was booked, the food was served, the photos were taken. Life continued exactly as it would have if my money had never been part of the conversation. That was the quiet truth no one wanted to admit. They never needed my money. They wanted it. And once I said no, the hostility was not about the wedding at all. It was about losing access to something they felt entitled to. By the time the event came around, my role had been reduced to an invitation and a polite distance. I attended, smiled, and left early. No confrontation, no drama. Just a clear boundary that spoke for itself. Looking back, that situation taught me something important. Big financial requests reveal people very quickly. When the amount is large, the entitlement is louder, and the reaction to refusal tells you everything you need to know. Doing well does not make you responsible for fixing other people's lives, and family pressure does not turn a demand into a duty. If you made it this far, thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen to these stories. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you who stayed until the end, and I hope you'll be back for more Reddit drama next time.